Hi, this is Dr. Cheryl Carthouse. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and this is part 2 of looking at how to revolutionize home and clinical practices with essential oils that act as antimicrobials and as well as supporting the immune system. So I'm going to go over a couple of the essential oils that were found mostly in the research. They are eucalyptus, thyme, tea tree, orange and bergamot. I grouped those together. They're sort of a citrus pair. Peppermint, sage, helichrysum, and cinnamon. These are all used for different types of applications, and so I'll get through those as we get into some of the details. So for eucalyptus, it was effective against 20 different strains of MRSA and the development of biofilms. So MRSA is one of those resistant bacteria that is often found in hospitals on bed frames, on windowsills, kind of around the walls, and that's why it can cause a lot of issues is because it tends to stick around and tends to be there, and when people are more susceptible, decreased immune systems, surgeries, all these other things are going through, it can capitalize and kind of jump in. The development of biofilms. So when different bacteria come together, they can actually create almost like a little bubble where they protect themselves. They can make lots of babies in there. They can send them out, and it ends up being something that basically encases them, that makes them a little bit more protected from outside things that are trying to break them down or to get rid of them. So those biofilms are essentially an extra sticky version or an extra sticky way of the bacteria being able to survive. So we want to be able to break those apart, to sanitize them, to get rid of them, and then same with the different types of bacteria as well. We want to try and break those down as best possible. So eucalyptus was found to be effective against 20 different strains of those types of bacteria. It is synergistic with ampicillin against MRSA, so this is actually using in conjunction with other things that we have out there that might be standards of care. It can potentiate beta-lactam activity. So these are different types of bacteria, or sorry, antibiotics that are used, and when they often are used against staph and against E. coli. So when we actually couple that type of antibacterial agent with the eucalyptus, it can help to kill the bacteria off much more effectively. It was also found to be synergistic with amoxicillin, ampicillin, cephalexin, and chlorhexidine. Thyme essential oil. Thyme was found to inhibit, the inhibition was comparable to standard antibiotic, and then also had synergistic enhancement effects with vancomycin activity and chlorhexidine. So again, it was found to be just comparable when using it thyme versus a standard antibiotic, but then again, when you compare or combine them, that they can actually even be more effective. So it's not just should we only be using plant medicine in one situation, but when we actually look at, well, what is the most effective outcome, how about we use these things together because they tend to work better. Evidence suggests that it can be effective as an oral antiseptic against MRSA and E. coli, so adding thyme to a mouthwash or something like that. The potency of essential oils is something to take very seriously, and as well as the quality. There doesn't tend to be a standard in the industry, and so the quality of essential oils are really important. If you want more information on that, let me know. We can have another little chat about that at some point. It also is effective against worms, against other microorganisms, and has some antioxidant effects, which can be really helpful, especially when applying it to food. So using thyme essential oils as a bit of a rinse for food, and it would add some flavor too. The vapor phase can also be effective against food-borne bacteria and molds and yeast. So even adding it into, say, if you're making meatballs or something like that, and you add a drop of the essential oil in there, you're letting something sit around and marinate, you could actually add some essential oils into that if they are food grade and leave it in the fridge, and it would actually help to decrease some of the bacteria that possibly could build up, or molds or yeast or different things like that. Next is tea tree. Tea tree at just a 10% concentration solution was equally or more effective than a standard treatment for a skin lesion with MRSA in hospital patients. There's no difference to be found in the prevention of MRSA at a 5% concentration versus the standard washing regime, which is typically using hand soap and that kind of thing. And then no evidence of habituation of MSSA and MRSA to the tea tree oil. So that's amazing and also really important. I find because plants tend to have multiple constituents in them, they're made up of so many different things that they tend to have less resistance to the bacteria. Some of the concern is if we're doing an overdrive of sanitization is that we're going to, or even using antibiotics too much, is that we can create this resistance. So when we can use herbal medicine and plants in such a way that it actually helps to decrease that resistance, but it's still effective at killing things, amazing. There's also evidence that suggests it could be possibly used in treating fungal pneumonias. Next are orange and bergamot. The vapor was used to reduce metabolic activity of both VRE and MRSA, which are both, again, those resistant strains. Enterococcal biofilms, which are digestive biofilms that can cause a lot of issues, by up to 72% and with no toxic effects on skin cells. So it has a really high ability to have an effect without being toxic, and those side effects of different types of things that we might use are always a concern of mine, because that tends to be something that I deal with in my patient population. It can reduce biofilm coverage up to 99.5%, and the vapors increase cell permeability and decrease intracellular pH, the membrane potential, and intracellular ATP in bacteria. So we want there to be more cell permeability for the bacteria in order for other microbial agents to come in. So there were no additional studies on those ones that I found in terms of it being used in conjunction with other agents, other sanitizing types agents, or other antimicrobials or antibiotics, but that's something that we want to understand, is that does it actually open up the membrane to be a bit more porous so other things can come in and actually help to kill things off. Or somehow disrupt the internal functioning, which is what it does with the ATP function in there. It kind of helps to get rid of that energy production that the bacteria have. Peppermint next is used as it was effective against clinical isolated MRSA and VRE, and then other foodborne microbes as well. And some evidence suggests that it may also be an effective oral antiseptic against MRSA and E. coli. So thyme and peppermint mouthwash, that sounds delicious to me. Sage, an inhibitory effect against MRSA, and mostly synergistic with a couple of different types of products. So ciprofloxacin, gentamicin were two of them, and also an antagonistic effect was found with one MRSA strain. Something important to keep in mind. Helichrysum was also found to be effective against multi-drug resistant gram-negative bacteria and increase the efficacy of beta-lactams and quinolones. So that might be something that we use in wound healing. Helichrysum I've used in wound healing before, and had a particular case study where there was a big gouge on a finger, and every time it bent, it would rip back open again. It wasn't healing very well after a week, and within 24 hours of putting the Helichrysum on, it actually had sort of a thin layer of skin over the wound, and actually the pain was completely resolved from that, and they found that they could bend it without it reopening again. So it was not completely healed, still took some time, but the Helichrysum made a huge impact for the quality of life because it wasn't sore or hurting anymore, and as well it helped to create that skin on there right away to help also reduce pain additionally. Cinnamon was effective against foodborne bacteria, yeast, and molds, and holds as a food washing agent and food additive. So if you don't have access to essential oils, use herbs regularly. Ideally, they're organic. We're using a high concentration of the leaves as they're dehydrated and those types of things, like herbs as in your kitchen and whatnot. But sage, thyme, we definitely not definitely, many people might have them in their kitchen. Those would be great ones to use. Cinnamon, they just have fantastic antimicrobial properties that you can actually use for food to help decrease the microbial load of your food itself, or actually help as an antimicrobial internally. So there are the list of essential oils: eucalyptus, thyme, tea tree, orange and bergamot, peppermint, sage, helichrysum, and cinnamon. Enjoy.